So here we
Gotcha.
go. I'm going to hit the go live button. And we should be off to the races. All right. Here we are. We are live. I'm going to make sure I can see it here on my channel here. I can. Perfect. Hello to everyone that is joining live today. There we go. I'm going to mute it from here so that way I don't see it. We've got Mike Williams here joining me today. Mike, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and pleasure to be here. And I'm looking forward to our time together.
So I'm going to hit the
Congratulations up.
resume record button here on my Zoom recording, so that way we can get the audio for that. Anyone who's watching the live stream, TimeCrafting Trust Premium members, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. Mike is here for the next probably 45 minutes or so. I mentioned this to Mike before we went live. I'm going to mention it to all of you that I'm expecting my new iPad Pro to arrive today. And I'm touching wood here or anywhere else that it doesn't arrive during this that it doesn't arrive during the live stream. But if it does, my son, who's home today, will knock on the door and they'll have to quickly go sign for it. Otherwise, they send it back to the FedEx headquarters, which is about 30 minutes away. So,
And then this will turn into an unboxing episode very quickly.
Immediately. It's not going to be just a small win. We're going to talk about all that. Mike, so before we get started, the way we record every episode, because this will eventually be published. Actually, I think it's going to be published pretty quickly. Well, within the next month or so. For the general public, is what you do is you introduce yourself now. So this is super easy. It's just basically, hi, state your name, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy. And then we get into it, and we do all the intro and outro separate outside of this. But members of the community knows how this works. You now know as well. So if you're ready, I'll repeat the line again because it's hi, state your name. And I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy. Okay? You good?
Good.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Hi, I am Mike Williams, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Mike, it's good to talk to you again. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
So you've got a book that I'm holding in my hands. For those that are members of TimeCrafting Trust Premium, they can see this video. If you want to join TimeCrafting Trust Premium, there'll be a link in the show notes. Had to put that out there. This book is called Doing to Done, Productivity Made Simple, and it's illustrated for busy people like us. So Mike, right out of the gate, why illustrated? I know that you've done some illustrated stuff before, back when you was it Getting Things Done for Teens, right? There were some illustrations in there.
Yes.
You've taken it now to non-teens.
Yes.
with your own kind of model. So why did you decide to go illustrated for this?
Yeah, the problem, one of the problems that I've seen over the years, and the problem I was solving for, was the fact that many books in the publishing industry are overwritten, and as such, and it's because of a publisher constraint. We got to have this book. It's got to be 300 pages. You got 100 pages worth of content, so stretch it. So then they stretch it, and then people write in, oh, they could have said this in 100 pages. So, and those books usually have a lot of good wisdom in it. It's just buried in all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. So what I learned from my time at GE, and then with the David Allen Company, and then 5 years at Zappos, was, how can I make this conversation really simple? Also on that journey, I learned the power of art. And also on that journey, I learned that there's a little suffering going on with people when a well-intentioned friend or manager gifts them this big, heavy, dense book. Inside, they got this little gag reflex going on because I don't want to read another dense book. And so my aim was to make it fun, visual, and engaging. And the other aim is to really focus on the 20% that matters most, the 20% that delivers 80% of the value, and also harness the power of art. So in creating this book, what I did is I partnered with an artist, Christine Yan, and I met her actually in Seth Godin's Alt MBA program.
Mm-hmm.
And we joined up on this project, and the pages are written such that there's art, there's simple, straightforward prose, and 1+1 = 3. So
Yeah, it's very well put together. And I think to your point about books and the idea of hitting a certain page count and the denseness of a book, when it comes to productivity books, I think that also plays a factor, because there have been a lot of productivity books written,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And, you know, even though, and I'll allude to David Allen, because, I mean, we both are very familiar with David. I mean, you worked closely with him for a number of years. I mean, Getting
yeah,
Things Done is not a long book, but it's a deep book, right?
yeah. Well, David wrote that book with a deep intention, which was he has a lot of knowledge, and if something were to happen to him, he put it all in that book.
Mm-hmm.
That book is chock full of wisdom. So it is a masterpiece. And it is, every ounce of wisdom that David has to offer is in that book. So if you have the time and energy and resources to go through it again and again, you're going to get a lot of great value out of that book.
So that's going to lend me to the next question.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm just as guilty of this, I think, as anybody, but why do we need another productivity book?
Yeah. Well, this productivity book is written for early to mid-career professionals and those that lead them, and is designed in 2022 for the reader habits of these leaders and emerging leaders, which have grown up on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, where small visual storytelling that has an impact and a wisdom nugget in it is easily digestible. So I wrote it for the current, kind of workforce, and it's not just a professional book; it's a personal productivity book as well. And ultimately, I've gifted books to people before, and sometimes they resist them. So I wanted to design a book that even felt different. I took a lot of inspiration from Austin Kleon's Steal Like an Artist book. And it's square and it feels good and it's got art. So when you hand it to somebody, it's almost like you're handing them a coffee table kind of book. And if nothing else, they'll enjoy the artwork. So I wanted something that was giftable. So this book, in the hands of a mentor or a friend helping a friend, or a boss helping an employee, or an employee helping a boss, it's a very approachable book. It's the first couple steps on your journey into this conversation. And if it resonates with you, it gives you access to more. And so I wanted a book out there. Like if there were 5 books on productivity, if a person wants to walk through this doorway, what they can expect is something simple, visual, and engaging to get them going immediately. So that's why I honor all the other books that are out there too. Yeah.
Sure. And I mean, I think that's one of the keys, right? Is, when it comes to these kind of books, you have to kind of gear it towards where people are at. You know what I mean? Like you have to kind of say, who is this for? I mean, Getting Things Done, Building a Second Brain, Cal Newport's Deep Work, like they all play a role when someone's seeking this. And this is actually an interesting thing, because I think the one thing that we see in common that people miss all the time, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the key things you bring out right away, which is the verbs. And you really drive this point home in this book, the idea of verbs. Can we get into that? Because I don't think we can stress enough how important verbs are in this whole process.
Yes. So what Mike's referring to is, if you take the title of the book, Doing to Done, there are doing verbs and there are done verbs. And those two elements form phrases that are very, very important. And the premise of this book is you're the superhero of this story. You're the superhero of your life, for sure. So if you put a superhero in a scene, and you say action, they're going to be doing something. They're going to be
Right.
calling somebody, they're going to be scheduling something, they're going to be buying something. So the act of forming a phrase that starts with a doing verb plus the phrase that it's associated with is extremely powerful, because what you've created for yourself there is kind of like a micro script or a micro instruction, and your brain loves that because it doesn't have to think about it anymore. And the one thing that separates doing to done is I just say the minimum viable product for any intention is one very next action. Your brain may want to go to 50, but this beautiful constraint says just select one, take the action, and you will ping the universe, life, and it will return information over and over again. Action equals information, right? So that's the doing side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the done side of it, those are verbs that end in ed. You're done. You've finished. That's the finish line. So crafting a done statement like finalized, resolved, completed, whatever that is, garage cleaned, can be the project. And the ed at the end of it helps you establish the done. What's the finish line? And then that frame gives you the opportunity to set up a question, which is, am I done? Yes or no? And if yes, mark that project off as done. And then if no, current reality today, what's the one next action that will help you move that thing forward, move you towards your done? So that's where the doing statement and the action verb comes into play.
Well, and I think the other thing that drives us home, and I leapfrogged this a bit, but the idea of small wins. Because I think what happens, and I mean, we've been in this space for a long time,
yes,
is people tend to not break things down into their smallest particles. So they want the big win. They swing, I mean, to use a baseball analogy, they want to hit the home run instead of play small ball and get, hit after hit after hit. You can get just as many runs through a bunch of singles and some adept base running than a grand slam. And it's much harder to hit a home run than it is to necessarily make contact with the ball just to get a hit. So, I mean, these small wins matter. And I think what I like about the connection between the verbs and the small wins is by saying, what is the next action? It almost compels you to go for, like, instead of write book, it's write 250 words. Or something along those lines, right? So can we talk about, because that's it's not a unique element. I would say it's a highlight. It's something you illuminate in this framework, is the idea of small wins. So let's get into that.
Yeah, kind of the short phrase is small wins, big impacts. It's that simple. Mm-hmm. So in the small win category, one of the things you can notice just as you do your own projects or you live into your own practices, workout practices or writing practices or business practices, is that each of those is fundamentally done in an action. So that is a unit of practice, really. And in the book, I speak of something, I frame it in something I call a work beat. And I have different size work beats, like what I say the workhorse work beat is like a 15-minute work beat. I've done so much great work with people in 15-minute sprints, and then change of focus, and I'll hold this little thing up, but it's do something and then win. So that's a work beat. Now you can have a micro beat. So anything under 5 minutes or so, something you can just complete in a short cycle is a micro beat. But the other side and power of a micro beat, or the concept of a micro beat, is if you're feeling a lot of resistance in doing something, if you break it down into a small unit, like if 5 minutes is too big, make it 1 minute. If 1 minute's too big, make it 30 seconds. If 30 seconds is too big, make it 15 seconds. For example, like with meditation or something like that, or you need a moment just to calm down or calm anxiety or something like that. If you have a 15-second practice, that can be life-changing. And I've witnessed that over and over again.
Mhm.
So once we get the notion of a small win, then we can expand the duration of it to the appropriate size to fit your context. And that's going to be different depending on the individuals. So the important thing I want people to do, though, and want to create the conditions for, is to set them up to have a win. And the in-do win loop that I describe in the book is simply holding an agreement with yourself, keeping it, and experience the win of keeping that agreement with yourself and closing the loop. No matter the duration, we all deserve some wins. What happens many times, and what I observe, is people go in and start doing, but they never officially say, I stopped.
Yep.
And they just carry the guilt of not finishing. And you can stop and be incomplete. That's okay. And that's the nature of work.
You're the only way you're done your to-do list is when you are done. Like there's always going to be something to do, right?
There's always, and each one of these little cycles is a great teacher. There's kind of like one of the things I don't write about in the book, but what it sits on is this natural infrastructure that we all operate on. I call it STAR. So we have things that come through our senses.
Mm-hmm.
So you see something, you hear something, you feel something, you smell something, you taste something. Then that stirs up T, thoughts, stories. You can't help it. In the book, I call that the party in the brain.
Yeah.
So ST part of STAR is what shows up. We cannot change that. That our biology is built for that. The AR part of this operating system, A stands for awareness. Oh, I have a thought, but I am not my thoughts. So now I can bring in tools such as, action verbs and doing verbs and done verbs and role clarity maps and project clarity maps to help me create awareness.
We're going to get into maps here in a minute too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Around the situation at hand. And then R is the appropriate response. So awareness and response is what we practice. So there's what shows up, and then there's what we practice. And that's our human operating system. And you can run a lot of different kind of wetware widgets on top of that operating system to help you contextually, situationally get where you need to go.
So as we're talking about this, I've been thinking a lot about this over the last few years, and more so over, I would say, recently as we emerge from what could largely be described as a rather big pause, or at least a slowdown with the pandemic. And the STAR kind of framework that you just mentioned, I think heightens that to a degree, or at least supports it. Do you think time can truly be managed? Do you think, based on that, like based on the idea of what happens and their response, I mean, and Oliver Burkeman wrote about the 4,000 weeks, which I'm sure you've probably read.
Yeah.
And I've been, as somebody who spends a lot of time thinking on this, you and me both, I wonder if we're managing the wrong thing. Like if we get caught managing the wrong thing, and conversely, we've also kind of effed up what productivity is too, to a degree. And we're like so consumed with, and I mean, when I'm being general here, consumed with this idea of I need to get as much done as possible as opposed to the right things, which would likely explain why for some people the concept of getting things done, they end up doing that old polishing the runway thing, right? They're doing like the low hang, and they're not getting to those higher levels. We're going to get to the life map, the clarity map, the project map that you allude to in here as well. So I guess like time management and productivity, those have evolved, I think. And again, my question, do you think time can truly be managed? And if so, how? If not, what should we be managing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if time were part of the equation, it would be the constant. So I don't think there's anything to manage in that. But but what we bring to a moment our focus and our intention, I think those are things that can be managed, exercised, cultivated, and they can be cultivated by the different roles we hold in our life. They can be cultivated by the different situations we find ourselves in. And I think that's the key thing. And going back to the work beats, the work beat is just it's a construct to help you manage a focus for a duration of time.
It's because it's understood. It's understood.
Yeah.
People know what 5 minutes is. People know what 15 minutes is, but
Yeah,
they're not necessarily sure what they can complete in that time frame.
right. I kind of looked at the work beats like a widget in Pro Tools. Like if you're putting together a song and you've got all these different layers, but there's like an energy, there's an intention, there's different times of day you'll have different energy available to you for those beats. So you might be playing a low note, you might be playing a high note, you might be playing a strong drum beat, you might be playing a soft drum beat, depending on what's available to you in current reality in that moment. That is what's available for you to muster your focus, to muster the intention for the moment, and to produce whatever is available to be produced in the moment. And in the book, I also talk about two sides of doing, which is doing your planned work and then doing unplanned work. And a key piece of that is the art of doing nothing. Yeah. And having space between the beats. I think it was Miles Davis says, the music is the space between the notes. And sometimes in our work, it's the same. Like you probably have captured some of your best ideas when you're not trying to capture them.
Yep.
You're out on a walk, and it hits the default mode network of your brain. We're starting to link a lot of various things together. Oh, I had this conversation with Mike Vardy. I read this book. I just had this experience. Voila, I think I just found an insight for myself. And then you can package that wisdom into an action and then test it out. And we just do that over and over again.
Yeah, when I think part of the interesting nuance about productivity, time, all that stuff is that when you're working from a individual perspective, it's very subjective. Once it starts to become bigger organizationally, it becomes very objective, which is why we tend to go quantitative when we're working in a larger group. Let's get to inbox 0. Let's do this. Here's our KPI, like all that stuff that's numerical, because you can touch it, you can feel it. There's a mutual understanding. Whereas with personal, what you and I or whoever's listening brings or watching, if you're a TimeCrafting Trust Premium member, brings to the table is very subjective, which is what this addresses. What you're talking about addresses. But I want to shift gears and talk. You brought up music as a metaphor a couple of times. How big are you a big music fan? Do you play? It'd be interesting. And also the space of doing nothing. Do you fit some music into, would that be something you would consider hey, this is a role I have. I'm going to make sure I foster that. I find I use comedy a lot, obviously, right? And story and music. Is that a passion of yours?
It's a passion. I don't play, I don't sing, but it's just understanding songs, lyrics, lyricists, musical constructs like Rick Beato. I don't know if you found him on YouTube.
Oh yeah. He just he had didn't he have a video recently about a gentleman who was in his 80s that just passed away that he talked about
Oh yeah.
guy, yeah, you know him. I'll find it. We'll link to it in the show notes. And he obviously, yeah, I've seen his stuff. He's got the studio behind him, and he's good. Yeah. I know who you're talking about.
So for a person such as myself who's not a musician, through his stories and through his interviews, I get to see and feel what it must be like to understand that language called music as a player, as a singer. I can kind of get a glimpse into what that must look like. That's my extent of music. But on the artistic side, writing, I just started doing improv. I'm part of an improv group. So that has taught me, how to be in the moment and how to have an empty mind and accept what the current reality is.
Yeah.
So things like that
I have
are
plenty
wonderful
of experience with improv. plenty. That's actually how I got my start. Yes, the whole rules. Yes, and oh yeah,
Yes,
I've
and
actually.
yeah.
So what's interesting is improv is the genesis of sketch, which we also performed, which is also the genesis of stand up, right? Because
Yeah.
improv, you're right, very much in the moment, very
Hmm.
much you have to. If you go in with any kind of preconceived notion or idea, you're not improvising. Like you literally need to be, and there's rules. There's which is it, and again, like anytime you look at a framework of any sort, creative, whatever, there's always going to be some form of rules because the rules help preserve the integrity of the form, whether it's art, whether it's whatever, the craft, right? So for
Yes.
example, one of the rules is blocking, right? So if I was to say to you, Mike, hey, what do you think about isn't it such a, like, it's a beautiful day outside? And you were to say, what do you mean it's raining? That's blocking. Like that's,
Yes.
but there's other things like pimping, right? Where it's like, Mike, if I know you do a really great Christopher Walken impression, I'm like, hey, Christopher Walken, how are you? That's totally pimping. You can
Yeah.
get away with that. So you can bend the rules in
Yes.
improv, but you can
Yes.
only do it once you've understood the fundamentals.
Right.
So when we talk about this in relation to your book, the maps are fascinating to me because they're very, I mean, everyone has their own map, right? And it's not like it's a triptych that you used to get from the auto club where it's like, here's the path you must take, right? It's like, here's a map, you get to decide. So we can start with the life map because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things you really wanted to drive home in this book was avoiding this idea of what can happen in a lot of productivity frameworks or any kind of processes. And it's just because it's low-hanging fruit of this idea of, quote, polishing the runway or checking off as many boxes as possible, rather whether they're inconsequential or not, just so you can say, look, I got a lot of stuff done. With the life map, it seems to me that you're trying to say, hey, listen, don't just stay here. Like, get up there, because otherwise what's going on down here won't get you to where you want to go, right?
Right. The life maps it's an interesting tool to use, and I use it with my coaching clients, and it's an interesting tool that serves a purpose in the book as well. And so what Mike is describing is if you were to take a piece of paper and to just draw an arc and label it 0 to 100,
Mm-hmm.
and those are the ages, and then you draw a vertical line at your current reality, your current age. That represents your current reality. And then there's a past you, a current you, and a future you. And the life map helps set up the question, how can the current you help the future you become the best you? And that possibility space we call fresh start territory. And by drawing that vertical line to the current you, you're also expressing your current reality. It's like you walked into a kitchen and there's only 3 ingredients. What are you going to make? Right. Sometimes you'll walk into the kitchen, there'll be 10 ingredients and you'll have more options. But it's always grounded in reality. So this idea of fresh start, and if you look at the book, the color yellow is the energy of the fresh start, and it just plays out throughout the rest of the book. Yeah. And so that is the light of possibility that we all have. No matter what just happened in the past moment, you can always have a blank canvas and a fresh start in the next moment. And understanding that and then practicing that over time creates the conditions for possibilities to emerge. It increases your return on luck over time. So that's what the life map is. It's meant to bring you up to a higher level of perspective so you can say, where am I? And it kind of jars people a little bit like, wow, I'm on this journey. Where am I going? Why am I going there? How did I end up here?
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's a simplicity to it, right? Like, I mean, and that's, I think what and again, the book's subtitle is Productivity Made Simple.
Yeah.
Not necessarily easy. That's, I think, like there's definitely, we want to have that distinction there. But I know that when people like, and when people are trying to think about that higher level of thinking, the life, if there's too much in the way, then it keeps them from that fresh start. It keeps them from thinking it's too late, right? Or, well, this is just the way it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing the life map does is it helps orient you. It's it's a tool to help you orient yourself on your journey and sets up the narrative that you're the hero of your own story. And that's what the book continues to build on, to help you, the hero, find some tools that you can put in your leadership toolbox, personal and professional, to help you guide you at any stage or phase or transition in life. And so that's what that does.
So if we're going to talk about projecting, which is what
Yeah.
that kind of does, let's talk about reflecting, because, and I mean, this is not, again, I want to be absolutely clear. The weekly review is a very fantastic element of the getting things done methodology and framework. It's also tends to be the one people let fall by the wayside because it feels very onerous, especially the first time you do it.
Yeah.
But once you do it regularly, that's not a problem. So let's be clear about that. But I think that a lot of people get so focused on the and on the doing, on the like, let's go, 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 go. They don't take a moment to reflect, like to pause, reflect. And then you've got in here review, reflect, reset, which I think is a very critical part that it doesn't get into too much in a lot of other frameworks.
Yeah.
But why was it so important for you to draw particular attention to this piece of reflection, this review piece in this book? Because again, it doesn't get the attention it deserves in everyday life. It doesn't. People are so focused on moving forward, and we're told what's past is past. Don't look at it. Da, 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 da. But there's, again, nuance there, right?
Right. So, yeah, reflection. I think if you look in all the wisdom literature and traditions, reflection is a key moment, whether you're going to your place of faith, whether you're just looking at your calendar. It helps you create perspective at the appropriate horizon. Like, what happened last hour? What's going to happen the next hour? What happened yesterday? What's going to happen today? And what's going to happen tomorrow? So there's different levels of this. In Western culture in particular, and in the kind of the overall workbeat of life, a weekly reflection helps you gather up what just happened. And one of the key themes in the book is, how can we create a small batch of stuff and reconcile that in small batches versus letting things get too big? So the review it phase helps do that. And the subtext of the review it phase, which is not explicitly expressed in the book, has been influenced by a lot of wisdom traditions. One in particular comes from the Jesuits. The Jesuits have something called the Examen. I think I'm saying that properly. But basically, the way the Jesuits moved through the world was they had, about every 4 hours, they would stop. And then they would create a moment where they reflected on what just happened in the past 4 hours. And then they would say, what am I grateful for? What did I learn? And they used that energy to say, how can I use that in the next 4 hours for the highest purpose of what they were serving? So that was pretty ingenious. It's just a nice little algorithm for reflection. Now, in doing the reflection, the purpose of the reflection is to look back primarily at your calendar and your project list, just to make sure you're not missing anything and every project has a next action. And then it asks two things on the reflection piece, which is, what am I grateful for? 3 small things. What did I learn? 3 small things. And that positions you to respond, your reset, and create your new fresh start. And now you start incrementally putting in the 5-minute workbeat that was that little intention that you've been carrying around for years. You just haven't found space for it. I have one client that started with a 5-minute workbeat. It became a 15-minute workbeat, became a 2-hour workbeat. And then she said, I'm meant to do this. So it led to a career transition. So that 2 hours is now 40 hours in a week. So it can start really small, but you're discovering that piece of yourself that's waiting to be found. And that's extremely liberating, helps people live into their authenticity, helps them let go of old stories and create the new stories that they want to live for the rest of their life.
I've got a question that's coming in from the community about the other maps that I've alluded to.
Yeah.
So the project map and the clarity map, the role clarity and the project clarity, rather. So let's dive into one, because I want to be respectful of time. Plus, I want people to pick up this book. I want people to pick up the book. And we haven't even gotten, which we're going to get to before we wrap up, about email management, because people, that's a big pain point. That's the thing I think that can keep a lot of people from, again, living those work beats the way that they should be, and all the other stuff that comes in here because it's external demands. But let's talk about the roles clarity map, because again, I think it's fairly, I would say that it's probably something that doesn't get as much value as it should. Projects, I mean, we know there's a lot of people that, when you go through the projects area in here, you're probably going to get a greater sense of what to do. But roles, I don't think people get to the nitty gritty or deep enough with that. So can we touch on that?
Yeah, I would say there's three primary working horse maps in the book, and that would be the doing to done map. The second one is the project clarity map, and the third one is the role clarity map. So just a high level on each of those. So
Sure.
A project, on your doing to done map, you have a doing statement and a done statement. And some of your projects need more thinking. So the project clarity map is a tool to help you understand why you're doing a project. What's the purpose of it? What's the vision of wild success? And if you're co-creating a project and you can co-create those first two statements, that will help save a lot of miscommunication down the road and enable you to check in more effectively, more efficiently, and make sure all parties are on the same page. So the project clarity map helps you think through projects in a very methodical way, something you can practice over and over again on projects of all types. So I'll just leave that one at that. The role clarity map speaks to the hero of the story, which is you. So if you look at your life, you occupy a lot of different roles. So using me as an example, there's me as an individual. I'm taking care of my mind, body, and spirit. And that's something I call the anchor role in the book. We all have it. And it holds our purpose in life. And we have a vision for our life. And then underneath the role, that's the why part. And then the how part is held in practices and projects. And then the what are we doing specifically is held in the action. So now we're back down to actions. So every role has that construct, a why piece, a how piece, and a what am I specifically going to do. Now the why section of a role animates the role with a story, right? It enchants it with a story that you're living into. And then everything below that is animating how that story is going to be lived out. Now you have probably at least 5 to maybe 10 or more roles in your life. Me as an individual, me as a husband, me as a father, me as a writer, me as a doing to done business owner, me as a coach, me as an improver, me as an open water swimmer. All those different roles have different practices, and they have different projects, and they have different actions. And when you have your role clarity map all filled out, it helps you answer the question, do I feel appropriately engaged with my life? Is one role occupying too much time and space over other roles? And is there suffering going on because of that? Or am I experiencing or expressing a new thing that I'm noticing about myself that I've always wanted to do, but I just haven't been able to name it, claim it, and express it? The role clarity map can help you name it and say, what does a practice look like for that role? So you can start doing it and getting feedback loops going. So fundamentally, you are a hero made up of a lot of sub superheroes, and each of those different roles have different energies. And probably the best story I have about this is before the pandemic, when we used to drive to work and come home, right, and then walk through the door of your house, that was a symbol of me going from one realm to another. That was the portal. And then I would I created a list for myself called Before I Walk Through the Door, understanding that I was moving from work role, work Mike, to husband, father Mike. And then I would park some reminders that my daughter had a presentation that day, my son had a test, my wife had a good day or bad day. So I could go through the door with high fives or hugs or whatever was needed, or a question for the dinner table. It made me dad ready, made me a better father, understanding that I had these different roles. So that's how roles can help. And that's what that map does.
I'm going to follow up with a question that I'm sure someone who might be feeling like, okay, but that seems like a lot. Like, it seems like a lot of work to do that stuff. The biases that show up, right? It's like, but can't I just hit my to-do list? Like, why do I need to focus on project clarity and roles clarity? Specifically, maybe the roles clarity. The project clarity, they may be like, oh, I get that. But the roles clarity, what the person that says, I don't have time for that, or when am I going to find time for that? What do you say to them?
Make it as simple as you can. You know, you can either have no rules, or one of the easiest things that I see is people identify, here's my work life, here's my personal life. So you identify it as two. And that's your first map. And I always encourage a crappy first draft of everything. So, you know, in less formal situations, I call it a shitty first draft. So just get your shitty first draft out there. And then just know that this framework is there for you to build on. It's like the first Lego of the Lego board. Just put it down, and it's going to beg the second, third, fourth Lego over time when the time is right. There is no perfect answer for everybody. And Doing to Done is all about creating your trusted system. And then I'd like to append to that version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, because as you grow, you know, whatever you need is going to grow and change, but this system can adapt to those situations. So it's a very kind system. It invites you in, it invites you to fall off the wagon, it invites you to come back and be kind to yourself, because I've fallen off the wagon a bazillion times and I do this stuff.
Yeah. I hear you.
But then it's like, how long do I stay down? Is it just 5 minutes? Is it 5 days, or is it 5 months? And each of those different answers has different consequences.
Sure.
So that's all.
And the simpler the framework, the simpler it is to get back up and running again.
Exactly.
Edward, who's a member of TimeCrafting Trust Premium, has a question. He goes, how does individual introspection help clarify project leadership?
Depends on where the individual is in the construct of the project. So number one, just take the construct of the project out of it. Introspection on a project helps you understand, you know, why does this project exist in my life? What's the purpose of it? What is my personal vision of wild success for this project and my participation in it? What ideas do I need to stir up to meet that purpose and vision? How do I organize them? And then what's the one next action? Review that plan to make sure it works. And then what's the one next action that I need to take to work on that? So from an individual perspective, it really helps continue grounding you in purpose and vision and organizing and ideation, and separating those steps out and recognizing each one is a mini dojo to go to practice over and over. So, you know, projects are a great way to do that, to practice that discipline. In a work context, if you're a person who's delegating a project to somebody, the project clarity map helps you delegate clearly with agreed upon purpose and vision and standards, so the person receiving it, can you increase their probability of success? If you're being delegated to and those fundamental components aren't being delivered to you, you can ask questions like, what's the purpose of the project? Oh, okay, now, Mr. or Mrs. Manager, what's your vision of wild success when this is done? Okay, I got it. Now I'm on the same page as you. Thank you so much. And that can increase your probability of success with the project. And you also have people witnessing you asking really interesting questions that you want to be clear, so you don't waste their time, you don't waste your time, you don't waste the customer's time as you're pursuing these projects.
And it creates permission for questions to be asked.
It creates, the question is the coach in this book. So everything we do is kind of framed around the quality of the question we ask in a particular moment. So Edward, thank you for your question. I appreciate it.
Speaking of questions, this is the last one I have for you. And I'm not going to end this on a sour note because I don't think it really is, but email management.
Yeah.
The sour note isn't so much like it's the thing that takes time. The sour note is that the framework you talk about was pioneered by Tony Hsieh of Zappos, who's no longer with us.
Yeah.
But when I discovered that email practice, it's one of the few I recommend that because I do not recommend Inbox Zero. I think Inbox Zero, first off, you and I both know that the term Inbox Zero is not what it has become.
Yeah.
We know that. Thank you, Merlin Mann, for creating the term. And I'm sure that I'm almost positive that he's like, what has it become? Can you explain Yesterbox? Because I think it's a very valuable way to approach email and communication, I think, as a whole. So can you kind of walk through that for somebody who's listening to this or a premium member who's watching this that's like, I'm struggling with email, help me out here?
Yes. So Tony Hsieh, who is the CEO of Zappos, was my boss. And he wrote a blog a long time ago called Yesterbox, and then I got to watch him work as Yesterbox in reality, which was phenomenal. And in the book, one of the constructs that I encourage is how can we, when we have stuff coming at us, how can we create small batches that are finite, something we can work through, and again, declare a win. So the Yesterbox basically differentiates itself from the inbox in that you only process yesterday's emails. So it does a couple different things when I'm coaching people. A, it helps quantify the number of inputs that are coming in. We can actually assign a number to a Yesterbox. It's 50, it's 250, it's 500. Sometimes you have 25 things come into your inbox, but it feels like 500, but it's really only 25. And then that creates a small batch. It's known, it's fixed. And when you get that thing to zero, it's not going to pop one more back in and say, oh man, I was there for a second. So once you get your Yesterbox to zero, it's for zero forever. And then there are a couple of tips on how you can efficiently move through your Yesterbox, which is basically sort your Yesterbox based on name, and you can delete the things that are obvious. You can move to reference the things that are obvious, and what remains usually is something that needs your attention or action. So you take your 50 and maybe you're down to 5 or whatever your number is for that day, because it can change. But the principle is a small batch that you can work through to get to zero to help you win. And feel free to, depending on the volume you get, you might have a Yester week. Yep. You might have a Yester month, or if you're catching up.
Well, you could also adapt it the other way, which, like, let's say you've got a boss who is a little less forgiving if you don't get back to them via email. You could Yesterbox everybody but them, right? Like, so there's an adaptability there as well, because instead of having the inputs coming in from everyone beyond today, it's like, okay, well, I only have to worry about the boss because the boss just doesn't get that email. Like they are somebody who requires email responsiveness. So you can play with it. It's not the framework is, again, the framework fosters freedom, and that's another thing that you've done. I've said this before. A framework, frameworks foster freedom. You've got this in here. Edward's got another question here, and this will be the last one before we wrap up. When and how does the individual role transition to the collective role?
There's 3 levels of coordination. So there's coordinating with yourself, you as an individual. There's coordinating with another person, so you in partnership with another person. So if you have a partner, you've probably already experienced this, 2 people trying to coordinate. And then there's coordinating with 3 or more people. So in the partnership and in the 3 or more people, a group environment, this is where culture comes into play. So culture, what is culture? Shared language, shared tools, shared systems, shared stories equals culture. So what Doing to Done helps with is create a language, and like you said, a framework that can be commonly known and work within, but not restrictive. So different kinds of work and different kind of personalities can work through it. But we have a standard language for saying, what's your next action? What does done look like? Okay, now that what's done looks like, what's the purpose of the project? What's the vision of the project? If you just have those 4 elements in your vocabulary in a group environment and it's shared, there's going to be a lift of clearer communication between individuals that helps them move work forward with less drag. So that's how it happens. But there are 3 levels of coordination: with yourself, with partners, and with groups.
And it doesn't happen overnight either. That's the other thing too.
It doesn't happen overnight. Unless you take the workshop, then
which, let's get into that. So, Mike, the book's called Doing to Done, Productivity Made Simple.
Yeah.
Really great read. Thank you so much for not only putting this out there, but taking the time to join us today for the episode, as well as on the live stream well in advance for TimeCrafting Trust Premium members. Where can people pick up the book and then the workshop? Touch on that.
Yeah, so you can pick up the book at doingtodone.com. That's doing with TO done.com. And if you go to that website, you'll see there's a place for the book. There's a place for a free webinar where I bring you through the first map, the Doing to Done map. And then there's workshops that are available for individuals, kind of like in a virtual public setting, as well as business workshops. And another thing that's going to be up there soon, if it's not already, is one-on-one coaching or team coaching that I do as well. And then we're also, spreading this across the world through global partners. So we have partners in different countries that are signing up to be global partners. And that's another avenue for folks if you're that kind of business or person.
Mike, thanks so much for taking the time today to have a conversation with me.
Great catching up with you. Good to see you. How's your daughter doing, by the way? I forgot to ask.
She's doing really well.
Awesome.
She's actually at the point now of, she's going to be 18 in February.
Sweet.
Yeah. She actually asked for her first planner, from me. She's like, I think I needed to, and I'm like, oh my, and I went through all. It was a whole thing, and my wife was like, "Oh no, you've unleashed the Kraken."
It's rough being the son or daughter of a productivity person,
totally.
Or it can be.
Everybody watching the live stream, we're going to end it now. Thanks so much for joining us, and Mike, stick around for a second, but I'm going to end the live stream for everybody here. All right, take care, everybody. The video will be up shortly for those of you that are watching live stream that are want to watch it again. All right, so live stream is done. I'll also